You know that moment where you are almost done with the painting and then you totally screw something up and you try to fix it, but it doesn't really work, and so you just end up covering it with whiteout? Hey guys, I wanted to welcome you back to my YouTube channel, and I know it's been a long time. Thank you for sticking with me. A lot has happened since my last video. For one, I graduated college. Yay, claps. And two, I think I have like 400 subscribers now, which is crazy because I only posted one video. So thank you so much for liking and subscribing that video to me from that video. Yeah, I'm super grateful, and I definitely want to get back into YouTube. So without further ado, here is a Watch Me Paint, and this is actually going to be a special Q&A edition. Well, I've decided I'm going to answer some questions that people left in the story when I asked for Q&A questions, and then I'm also going to answer some questions that I get a lot in my comments because I see a lot of them over and over again, and I think now would be the perfect time to address it. So without further ado, let's begin. I think I'm going to start out with probably the number one most commonly asked question I get on Instagram or just on any form of social media, and that is what supplies I use. So first off, I actually have another Instagram, 718 supplies, and I have pictures and a list of all the tools I use for the most part. Also, side note, if you are here from my Instagram, I would really, really, really recommend reading my descriptions because I usually tag all the brands that I'm using. That being said, I'm still going to cover all of my supplies here. So first off is the Kuretake Zig watercolors, and this is the set on screen that I use. I use it for most of my paintings. I really like it because it's super pigmented and it lifts super easily, which is great because I make a ton of mistakes, and then I end up having, if I just like water it down and then dab it off with a paper towel, it usually goes away, except not when it's black, but most of the time. And that saves me so much when I'm painting. So if you're a messy painter and you like really bright colors, I would definitely recommend these. And next up is my brushes, and this is actually something that I've gotten a ton of comments saying like, oh, I need your brushes. Like, how do you paint like that? And they think that it's my brushes that are the reason I can paint like I do. And actually, I tend to use pretty cheap brushes. I've actually used Daiso brushes, and I don't know if you have Daiso in your area, but it's basically like the Japanese version of a dollar store. And it's a whole pack of like 6 or 7 brushes for $1. US. And so I can paint the same way I do with any brush with those cheap brushes. So I say that as long as your brush hairs aren't falling out, most brushes are good. Though personally, I also really want to do a video reviewing like some nice fancy art brushes because I really want to get one of those ones, you know, that's like super thick but narrows down super tiny so that you can get like really tiny details and also really big washes with one brush. They look so nice. But I also don't know that much about art supplies. So if anyone has some really nice brush recommendations for me to try out, I would love to hear them in the comments. But as of now, the brushes that I use a lot, the ones that I consistently use would be the Grumbacher brushes. And I use, I think, 0, 0, 0, 3 zeros. I think the 401 is super fine, and then it keeps getting messed up and then it's just useless, but the 301 has lasted me forever. If I'm wrong about the zeros, I'll post it on the screen right here, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about the zeros. And then I just use like a pretty average sized round brush from them, and also I'm probably mispronouncing their brand name, but you know, I'll also write that on the screen. And now that I'm looking at the video, you can clearly see me using one of those brushes that has the water in the handle, and I used to get questions all the time about those brushes, and I have actually never used them with water in the handle, so maybe that's something I should try sometime. But I usually just use them like a normal brush, so that would just be like a normal flat brush, and I was using that because actually all my stuff and most of my brushes were in shipping across the country because I went to school in Rhode Island, and since I did just graduate, I had to move all of my stuff from Rhode Island all the way back to Los Angeles, where I live. And so I didn't have access to most of my supplies for a while. I just brought back a couple because of a commission I'm working on. So I kind of made them as my essentials. And then once I got home, I found this big flat brush and I was like, okay, I'm going to use it because I need to fill in some large spaces like this hair, which was also really fun and really pretty. And oh, I love colored hair. So I will say it was actually kind of a struggle figuring out exactly how to paint a gradient on hair. But I'm glad I got to try it out and I think it turned out pretty cute. You'll see it in the end. So moving on, we have my sketchbook. And for the most part, I paint in a sketchbook and I use the ones from Mosseri Co. I guess probably Mosseri Company. I don't know. Never asked. So the first 3 of those I actually bought from them, and then the last one they were kind enough to send me, and so I decided to try out the one with watercolor paper instead of mixed media, and it's a new one. And I have mixed opinions on both of them. Like, oh, I love their sketchbooks. They're definitely some of my favorite sketchbooks. For me personally, they work really well with my style because they don't have a lot of tooth to the paper, and I don't like paper that has a lot of tooth to it. I know a lot of people prefer paper that is gritty for watercolor and like has that kind of watercolory look. I do my commissions on hot pressed paper, and so that's completely smooth. And then this is a nice alternative. It has a bit more tooth than a hot pressed paper, but it's still not super noticeable. And so the watercolor paper is definitely much thicker and handles water a lot better. But I noticed that you can get much deeper blacks on the mixed media paper, and the mixed media paper is also a lot smoother. And so I don't know, it kind of depends on what I'm working on. I really like using both. I think it's super nice. I would definitely recommend both, and it just kind of depends on the look you're going for. The watercolor one definitely looks more like watercolor versus more smooth like the mixed media one, but it can definitely handle water better. I also recommend the Aquarelle hot pressed paper, which is what I use for my commissions. It's so nice and so smooth and fantastic to paint on. But for the most part, I do 99% of my drawings in my Mosseri sketchbooks. And other than that, I think there's a couple other things that would be notable to mention. There is the one you see in the top of the screen, my pastel watercolors, and those actually came from a tube, but then I put them into, I think, a little pill case, and I use them like that because I don't really like working with like small amounts from the tube. I really like working out of pan watercolors, which I know isn't quite as popular, but it's my personal preference. And those are, I guess it's pronounced Holbein. Okay, funny story. So I would always pronounce it Holbein, but then my friend introduced me to the musical Six, which I absolutely adore now. I really love musicals and I just hadn't listened to that one. So I started listening to Six, which is the story of King Henry VIII's 6 wives. But in the middle of it, there is a song called The House of Holbein. And that is actually what I think. I mean, my friend told me that this is what the Holbein paints are named after, because that was a famous painter back in the old days. And they pronounce it Holbein. And if it's old British thing and the British people pronounce it Holbein, then it probably is pronounced Holbein. But I think it was also German, but then that might also be pronounced Holbein. So that aside, yes, the pastels are from Holbein, which is, I think, how it's pronounced after that whole rant. And I'm not sure exactly what the colors are, but if you look at my Instagram, the 718 Supplies one, I have a picture of them and they are absolutely beautiful. The yellow is my favorite thing when I'm painting blonde hair. It just makes the most beautiful blondes. And I used to have a lot of trouble painting blonde hair until I got that specific yellow. And it's like absolutely stunning. Highly recommend. They're really interesting paints and I felt like they were a nice supplement to my Kurtake palette because they were colors that I definitely didn't have. And they were a bit more expensive, kind of a splurge, but I would definitely recommend getting them. They're really pretty and soft and sweet and just really nice. So other than those watercolors, moving on to more of my digital art, I used to use a tablet and Photoshop a ton, but Photoshop's kind of been in lately, like with our whole Creative Cloud thing and bumping up the prices and making it just really difficult for people to afford. And even though I had access to it with school, after I got my iPad, I pretty much only used my iPad to draw. I just love the convenience. I love drawing on screen. I've never had problems with lag or anything. So I have the iPad Pro and I think it's the 12 point something inch. It's a little bit smaller than my computer, which is the 13-inch screen, the 13-inch MacBook. And then with that, I use the Apple Pencil and then Procreate, which is probably my favorite drawing program. I know a lot of people really recommend Clip Studio, and I haven't gotten a chance to really explore that yet. But I absolutely adore Procreate. I think it's brilliantly made. It's so simple, so easy to learn. And once I got my own brushes and really started to like them, it just became my absolute favorite drawing program for digital art. And I think you can just get some really nice stuff considering it's just an iPad. And I love seeing developers move on to another so portable and easy to use and slightly more accessible surface than just a drawing tablet, because a lot of people will buy an iPad because they can use it as a computer of sorts, whereas not everyone wants to buy a laptop and like an Intuos, or what do they call them now? Cintiqs, buy a Cintiq, and then you have to set that up on your desk, and it's just a whole lot more work, I feel like, than just getting an iPad. So it's awesome that these programs are coming out, and big claps, snaps for Procreate for making a super awesome program. I would definitely recommend it. It's also crazy affordable. I think it's like a one-time purchase of $10, which is insane for what you get. And last but not least, when it comes to supplies, people always ask me what is the red lines of my sketch, or what it is that I sketch in. And I use both red and blue Pentel lead, and you can just put it in any mechanical pencil, get whatever size you want. And I just really like it because it doesn't smudge under my watercolors. And I feel like if I use pencil under my watercolors, it always has that kind of grayish undertone to it, and sometimes it'll show through, whereas the red just totally disappears. And then if there's like something that I want to be darker, I'll do the blue there, because that way, once I get a bunch of washes over it, I can still see it pretty clearly. So like the eyelashes and stuff like that, or maybe if I'm doing a blue skirt, I don't necessarily want the red to show through. But for skin, I find like the red hides perfectly, and I really enjoy using those. So that's it for my general supplies. There might be some stuff I missed, but for the most part, that covers it. And now I will move on to questions from you guys. So first question I'm going to do is from Twitter, and it's the only question I got from Twitter, but I don't have as many followers there, so it's fine. And it's actually from Chelsea. Her username is Cherry Art with 2 eyes. And actually it's pretty cool. I actually met Chelsea years and years ago when we were both super into Supernatural and both drew fan art for Supernatural. And then I came across her art on Twitter just recently, and I was super excited to see it again because I recognized her original comic, which had just been in the very beginning stages back then when I knew her. And her art's absolutely fantastic. I would definitely recommend following her. I think her username's the same on most platforms, but it's definitely that on Twitter. And so she asked, what would be your dream job? And for me right now, the answer, it's changed a lot through my life. I have a lot of different interests, and I have a lot of jobs that I would be really happy with, but I think right now what I really want to go into is accessory design. I love making jewelry. I love metalsmithing. I also love working with leather. I like making bags, and I absolutely love making shoes. I took a shoe class and I ended up TAing for it my last semester. And it was just super great getting to work with people, making shoes and getting to make my own shoes. And I would love to design shoes. I'm just a big fan of shoes. I joke with my friends that every time I go to the mall, I buy a new pair of sneakers. And it's kind of also not a joke because it kind of happens. I need to stop buying sneakers, but I really love shoes. So that's probably my dream job right now. But I would also super love to work and do like concept art or prop design for entertainment. I just have so many interests. And there's so many fun things to do, and it's so hard to decide. But yeah, I'm sticking to my answer. I want to make shoes. And now we're moving on to Instagram. So the first question is from Lena Mangaka. Anyway, sorry. I'm going to totally butcher every single username, just FYI. Okay, so they asked advice to whoever wants to get started with watercolor but has no idea. So I would say, just like get some cheap paints and try painting. Don't worry about having the best supplies or the best brushes or the best anything. And don't worry about it being perfect. And also, I want to note that you shouldn't feel constrained to a certain style. Like I had a lot of trouble watercoloring when I was trying to make it really realistic until I saw an artist who did them. Her username is OCRPR. Oh God, Ivy, I'm so sorry. I will put her username here. I'm forgetting the order of the letters, but I saw her art and I absolutely loved the way she used watercolors and how they were super flat, and that inspired my style a lot. And I kind of went from there. And I think just having a lot of broad inspiration will really allow you to figure out what works best for you. But yeah, the most important thing when learning a new media is just to remember that you're not going to be great at it at first. It takes a while to get good at it. And that's just what happens when you're picking up a new skill, because every media is an entirely new skill. They all work differently, and some things will carry over, but other things won't. Okay, moving on to the next question. This one's from The Starry Lamb, and it is, how long does it usually take to complete your paintings? And that kind of depends on the complexity of the painting and if I'm feeling like rushing or not. Some days I just can't take my time on paintings, and other times when I'm feeling like more calm or focused on something, then I can really take time and work on the painting. And those are the paintings that always come out way better. But I'd say probably, I can do a quick painting in maybe an hour and a half if I really wanted to, or they can take days, but not working consistently through days, like maybe like 6 to 8 hours on a more complex painting, or if I'm just being slow, or maybe I'm hanging out with a friend. But they don't take a crazy long time because I paint pretty small. You might think 8 hours is a long time, but compared to what people spend on like big, nice pieces, it's not that much time. I know people who will spend like half a year on a piece, and the piece is well worth that. But yeah, not for me. I do a lot of smaller, simpler sketches. Okay, so the answer to this next question is probably not what you're expecting, but it's from Laziest Workaholic, and it says, how do you keep your drawings tidy and neat and clean while you paint? And the answer to that is that most of the time I don't. I was working on a commission one time and I spilled blue paint like over half the painting, and I just used what's it called? It's a Mr. Clean eraser. So you can kind of use it, and it just works kind of like super fine sandpaper. So you're kind of sanding off the top layer of the painting. It's not ideal, but you know, when you're almost done with the commission and you screw it up and it looks really good, what are you gonna do? And in the end, it looked okay. It looked totally fine. Like you wouldn't have noticed it. But yeah, that's the truth. A lot of times my paintings, I get things all over it. You saw in the very beginning of the video, I spilled black paint because I was trying to blow dry it and it just didn't work out well for me. The paint was way too watery and it just went everywhere. This painting actually looks pretty decent, but also the camera's not quite close enough to catch up on like little spills on the side. I think even before I started this painting, I just finished the sketch and there was already, I got super frustrated because I got a red handprint on the side, but I managed to add the water. Like I said, these paints lift really easily, which helps a ton. And other than that, the answer is Photoshop. There's the patch healing brush. I think that's what it's called. It's the one where you can just click and it'll basically remove any little dot and replace it with what it thinks belongs there. And 90% of the time it can figure that out if it's just white paper. And so I'll just click and remove each of the little spots in the background, and no one has to know that there were spots all over my sketchbooks. If you look at them up close, you will see they are not very clean. They just look clean once I edit the photos. So yeah. Okay, I think we have a time for a few more questions if I'm not super long-winded about answering them. So the next question is from _concealer might fix it, which is kind of a mood. Whenever I don't sleep, I'm like, okay, maybe a little bit of concealer, and then you just go to class and at least you don't look like you're completely dead. But no more class, which is crazy. Okay, anyway, Concealer Might Fix It asked, do you like most of the art you make? And I think I've started to learn to appreciate my own art more, but I definitely have the natural instinct of I don't really like it. And I know this happens a lot because most of the time you kind of have, you know what your art is supposed to look like, and when you paint it, it just never seems to match what you want it to look like. And so sometimes when I feel really down, what I'll do is I'll just take a moment to look at my art and be like, okay, if you saw this as another person, how would you feel about it? And then I also look at other people's art who I know I admire and I say, okay, pick this apart as if it was your own piece. because I tend to be a lot harsher on my own pieces and I will just nitpick at the tiniest little things. And when I look at that art and treat it as if I made it, I start to notice so many more errors and I'd be like, oh, I'd hate this if I drew it. And I love these artists. And so suddenly it makes me realize, okay, well, the reason you really are hating on your own art is because you made it, not because it sucks. Though sometimes it might suck. It happens. And I think I can squeeze in one more question if I talk pretty fast. And this one is from Blending Craft with DIY. And it says, what age were you when you started sketching? And I've been sketching since before I can remember pretty much. I can't remember a time I haven't. I got pretty serious about it probably right before senior year of high school when I decided to apply for a design college. And other than that, yeah, it's just been something on and off my whole life. Yeah. So thank you for coming here. If you want me to do more Q&A videos, let me know in the comments. If you want me to do any other type of video, let me know in the comments. And subscribe, please. Thank you.